Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of Big Sound Small Town, the podcast that spotlights the talented and diverse musicians in small towns and communities. This season we're branching out to include the community of people who make it possible for musicians to be able to perform their music, the producers, the recording engineers, the venue owners, and many others, and as always, the small town musicians. Remember, small town doesn't mean small talent. Hear their stories. Today on Big Sound Small Town, my guest is audio engineer, record producer, and musician, Aaron Meier. Welcome to the show, Aaron.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Well, where are we at today?
We're in my private studio here in Shelby. This is where I've been doing the majority of my work for the last about 15 years here.
How did that start here?
Well, what got me here was I had been working, doing an internship at a major studio down in Atlanta, was living down there. My wife and I were in a long-distance relationship, and I ended up relocating here, and I just, my next step for me was there wasn't a lot of studios for me to go work at here, so I opened up my own shop. Yeah, opened up my own shop, and kind of went from there.
You want to talk about the early days of your own shop?
Oh man, that's been a long time ago. That was probably 2005, something like that. When I first got here, didn't have a lot of money. I was in my early 20s,
right.
And my wife and I were struggling to make ends meet. So which she was my girlfriend at the time, so worked several jobs, Lowe's, and a couple other places around town, and got enough money together eventually where I was able to go down and buy just a off-the-shelf computer from Best Buy, little 2-channel interface, a Rode microphone, and kind of set up shop, and it wasn't anything to talk about at that point. I mean, I bought some cheap foam, put up on the walls just to kind of help kill the reflections and at least make it sound somewhat professional.
So at that point, how did people find out about you?
Facebook a lot. Well, I don't even know if Facebook was a thing then. I was on MySpace. I think I was on Facebook a lot. Craigslist.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I put ads out on Craigslist. Word of mouth, people that I knew. I'd work with somebody, and then they'd tell their friend, and then they'd come by, and at that point, it was a lot of a lot of kind of small stuff. Kind of hip hop work tapes, guys that were just recording vocals over 2 tracks and things like that. Songwriter that was maybe recording guitar and vocals.
Right.
Nothing big at all, but it just kind of spread from there.
That's good, though.
Little by little.
I mean, that's really good considering where you're at now. Yeah. I mean, that's a.
It's been a long road.
Well, that's a self-made journey.
Yeah, there were probably easier ways to do it, but I'm here. So. Well,
now, when did that love? Did you start with a love of recording music, or just a love for music? Period.
Love for music, definitely.
I mean, you are a musician, and I don't want anybody to overlook that fact.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, that's what got me started.
Right.
Really, I credit my love for music to my grandmother. She was the one that kind of put that in me and pushed me even as a little kid to take piano lessons.
Right.
And, she played played piano at her church for 50 years. Never missed a Sunday.
That's great.
They've got a plaque on the wall for it and everything. But but she was that music was big in her family, and so she really brought it to all the grandkids and her,
that's good.
My mom and
So did you like take piano lessons?
Oh yeah. Early started probably first grade.
Yeah, it's kind of I think when I started doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a chore.
My grandmother was the same way. She was a piano player, so.
Right. She would sit there and have to make me practice and all of that, and then eventually, into high school, around 6th grade, I picked up the trumpet, played in high school band.
Right. Yeah.
Did that, pretty much every year.
Mine was trombone, but it's pretty much the same story. Yeah.
Right. And then when I was 15 or 16. I was riding around with my uncle, who's only 5 or 6 years older than me, and up until that point, I'd been pretty sheltered musically. I'd only really ever listened to gospel, some country, but we were riding around, and Metallica came on the radio. And it was the first time I'd ever heard of it.
Oh, yeah.
And within a year, I had a guitar and was learning every Metallica song ever released. So that was really the start of my passion for
right, yeah.
was, jumping in on the guitar, really.
So you'd play like in bands and stuff?
Not so much anymore, but back then
back then, you would play in bands back then.
Yeah, well, where I grew up, I grew up in southeast Georgia, a town called Hinesville. It's right there next to Fort Stewart.
Yeah.
And not a lot out there as far as music, not a lot of bands, so... the first probably 4 or 5 years of me playing guitar was all me in my bedroom playing along with the records, which is probably part of where that drive to be involved with recording came from, because I would listen to the records and that was more about trying to make myself fit into the record than it was about playing a live show, and I would put that stuff on and just jam out to it for hours and hours and try to learn every part on the record perfectly. And then eventually I relocated to Atlanta. My family moved up there, and once I was up there, of course,
that's a whole new world. It's a whole different world.
Bands everywhere, so I started getting into some bands then and playing. And it took me a while to kind of evolve because at that point, all I'd been playing was Metallica for 4 years. So everything I played sounded like Metallica. Yeah. Even when I wrote a new song, it sounded like Metallica. Yeah. So
it's not the worst thing, though.
Right. But it took a while to kind of break out of that and really kind of acclimate to getting my own sound and my own vibe. But yeah, from there, I just kind of dove into recording local bands, and it was really my Uncle Louie, Louie Winsky, that got me into recording.
Yeah, tell me about how that happened.
Yeah, he had some hits. He was a singer-songwriter. He had a couple of really minor hits back in the 70s, gospel and country, and he put out two or three albums, and he had kind of hung that life up for a while when he got married. And then when I was in my teens, he was in his probably mid-50s and decided to get back into songwriting. So he wanted to go out and buy some stuff to make a little home studio.
So he could do his demos.
Right, but he was completely computer illiterate, didn't know anything about anything digital. So he asked me to come in and learn how to use all this stuff. Right. To help him and show him how to do this. And of course, the only exposure to recording at that point that I had was a little Tascam 4-track recorder, that I was using to kind of put my own stuff together. Right. But that 2 years or so, with my uncle working on his stuff in his studio, that was really kind of where the
foundation.
Yeah, that's where it really came together.
Plus, that was probably a low pressure way to do it too.
Very much, yeah. It's the people that were coming in weren't paying anything. Right. It was, we were recording local church groups for free and just having fun.
Well, that's how you learn, though. And you can make your mistakes there when it's not quite as crucial as it is along the way.
And believe me, there were plenty of mistakes because this was late '90s, so this was before really computers were a huge thing, at least in the home studio.
Right.
Pro Tools was still a ways down the road, from being...
Well, that was the real changer with computers and music. Is Pro Tools.
Pro Tools was in the studios, the big studios by then, but there were no home studios running Pro Tools. So we had the little Roland. Yes, 1880 digital recorder, 18-track digital recorder, where everything was this little tiny 4-inch screen, and everything, all the editing was with knobs and buttons, and there were more than once that I accidentally deleted people's stuff because you hit the wrong button.
Oh yeah,
And it's it's gone. Sorry.
Either redo it or live without it.
Yeah. So trial by fire for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean but then I guess when you're doing it that way, you're learning. I mean, that's an apprenticeship.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, that's almost it's the same as an education, a college education doing the same thing.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, it's like a musical instrument. You either have the passion for it or you don't. And if you have the passion, if you have that bug, you're going to dive into it and wholeheartedly and spend all your time and energy focusing on it. So, it was, and I'll always be enormously thankful to him for bringing me in and letting me do that, because that put me on the path.
Then when did you take it to the level above that?
When I moved to Atlanta.
Yeah.
And, been playing around in bands and recording buddies and stuff like that, and
so once you had that, you knew that anybody you played with, we're in a band with Aaron, so man, we're going to be able to get this stuff recorded.
yeah, that was what I brought to the band. Some guys had the PA.
Yeah, exactly.
One guy had the band.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I could record the demos and run the sound at the shows.
But that's a good thing.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
But so I got to a point where I was like, okay, I really want to do this recording thing. It's for me. I playing in a band, I've always been in love with records. I've always, I put records on, and I love live performances. I love going to concerts, but there's something different. It's a different energy. It's a different feel. It's like when you make a great record, you've captured that forever.
True.
And you can put that on. A concert is here and gone. It's off into the ether.
Well, it's the Beatles. The Beatles. Once they realized they could not any longer perform live, they put all their energy and studio, and
Absolutely.
Without that, I'm sure that if they had toured, that would have never happened.
Yeah, or at least not to the level it did.
That it did,
because they literally spent their lives in the studio experimenting, and man, they did so much to advance recording.
They did,
But so once I decided that's the road I wanted to go down, I started putting in for internships at major studios.
Oh yeah.
And it was tough because most of them required a degree.
Right.
You either had to go to Full Sail or Berkeley or something like that. And of course I didn't have that. All I had was a demo reel on CD and a suit to interview in. I didn't even have a suit. I had a shirt and a tie. So I interviewed at 3 or 4 different ones, and finally ended up at Silent Sound.
So somebody did finally give you a go.
And it was pretty eye-opening. It was the first time I'd ever been in a real studio.
Right.
A lot of people that have been to recording school, they worked in real studios.
Right.
So for me, it was the Holy Grail. It was angels singing and everything when the doors open.
Sure.
But I spent about 1.5 years there learning from Tom TK Kidd is the guy that brought me on. He's the chief engineer there. He's worked with everybody, TLC and just everybody. It's anything that was going on in Atlanta in the mid '80s.
Did you cut most of your stuff with hip hop and rap at that time, or was there other stuff?
Well. For as far as recording, yes, most of the artists that came through to record were hip hop artists, R&B. Once you got into mixing, that room was a phenomenal mix room, extremely well known around the city for being a great place to come mix a record. So they got all kinds of. I remember when I was there, Elton John was there mixing.
When they would mix, it would be just all genres of music then.
Yeah. So you'd have everybody in there. Yeah.
So you got the mixing side of it as well as the recording part of it.
Absolutely. But I tell you, even more important than the technical side of it was just seeing how professional studios are run.
true.
Getting that perspective, seeing how they deal with clients, how all of that stuff. It's
yeah, there is way more to recording studios.
Yeah.
Okay, before we dip into where we're at
Sure.
today, give them an idea of actually an artist comes to you. What happens? I'm bringing my band. Well, I'll bring my band to you. We got, we want to record.
Okay.
What do you tell them?
Well, first thing I want to know is kind of the scope of the project.
Right.
Are we talking about a single? Are we talking about an album? What do you want to do with the recordings? Are you trying to get gigs? Is this just a demo, or is this something you want to put out there as a record?
Right.
Because the budget involved with those two things is wildly different.
True.
You can do a demo in a day.
True. Yeah, this is true.
You do an album, it can take you a year.
Yeah, it can.
There's just there's exponentially more work and detail involved in putting an album together. So that that's the first thing, is to try to narrow down what their goals are. Yeah. Because a lot of people, I think, just think of it under this blanket recording. I'm going into the studio to record.
They do,
but they don't necessarily have specific goals for what they're trying to accomplish.
Bands don't. I mean, we're not even talking. Just listeners have.
Sure.
Bands come in. We want to record.
Right.
Okay.
We've got some songs we want to record. Yeah.
How many?
Right. Yeah.
And what do you want to do with them?
Yeah. Exactly. And then that pretty much sets the template for where we go.
Now,
from there.
Is that where you take over as a producer a lot of times, or guide them?
Well,
do you need a producer?
It depends on the role they want me to play.
Right.
That's the other thing. A demo, you don't necessarily need a producer.
Right.
A demo is really more of just capturing the songs as the band plays them. You might do a little bit here and there to tweak something,
suggest something.
Yeah, but it's not. There's not a whole lot of production work on a demo. If they want to go the record route, if I want to make something that is going to stand up in the market, that's a whole different ball game, and I'll definitely tend to get more involved. How involved or in what areas depends wildly on the artist. Some guys come in, or some people come in, have phenomenal songs. I don't have to touch the songs. We don't have to mess with the lyrics or the melodies or anything. The songs are ready to go. We've got them in the bag. All we've got to do is work out the arrangements and go from there. Other people, they'll come in and they'll have the core of a good song, but maybe it's missing something. Maybe it's not completely there yet. So it can involve me sitting down and working with them to finish the songs. Right. It just.
Do you
really
bring them
depends.
players sometimes?
This
would sound good.
Yep.
It sounds good like it is,
Sure.
but we can. I know someone who can put something else on it.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, if most of the time, most bands that I work with are pretty self-sufficient.
Yeah, usually they are.
Everything that they want on the record is in the band. We might bring in,
a pedal player.
Yeah, exactly. Some outside instrument for color or something.
Right.
Working with songwriters is very different because most of the time a songwriter, they play guitar and they sing.
True.
Occasionally they might play a third instrument or second or third instrument, something like that. But they're probably not going to play drums and bass and all of these other instruments,
which are people that have to be considered in the budget too. That people don't think about.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that we talk about is why budget is so important to talk about it. And sometimes I get the sense that people are a little hesitant to talk about it because they feel like, if I know how much money they have to spend, I'm going to try to spend it all.
Exactly, yeah.
But in reality, it's just I need to know what's practical. I need to know what's within reach for you. Yeah. And the only way that I can make that assessment is to know roughly how much you have to spend.
Ballpark.
Right. So. But yeah, once we've figured out the budget and we know what the goals are, then we start talking about bringing in players. And there's a lot of things that I do myself.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's part of it too.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, especially in this market, the more you can do as a producer, the more cost effective you can be.
Yeah.
So most of the projects that I work on, I end up doing the drums, the bass, some guitar work. Right. A little bit of keys, if it's anything, I'm certainly not a great pianist or a great keyboard player. If it gets beyond anything kind of basic, I'll bring somebody in.
Right.
So and then there are times when my approach on an instrument might not be what it needs. And it's up to me to know that and say, okay, well, I could do this, but I think this person would do a better job.
So I guess you also have to keep a list of people that you can call, which is. I guess there's a lot of politics involved in that too that people don't see.
Yeah, there can be. I mean, it's for me, it's really about finding people that can deliver in the studio, because it's a very different environment.
It is. I mean, it's somebody else's money.
Yeah, and playing live is a whole different mentality from playing in the studio and putting something on a record, and playing your own music live is very different from having to then go and write something specifically for somebody else's song.
This is true.
Because it's not your song, you're adding to their vision. And that's a whole different
that is a whole different
mental approach. So
now, what kind of hours when you're working on a project? I know people don't see this too. You're not like 8 to 5, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the mixing, I do is, I'll be in here 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, mixing, because it's nice and quiet and no interruptions, and I can stay 100% focused.
I guess it's a lot of hours when you're on a project.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's for a fully produced song, with the intention of putting it out on the radio or whatever. You're usually looking at about 20 hours from beginning to end, including all of the recording, all the pre-production work, editing, mixing, and then eventually mastering.
Well, now, do you do the mastering, or you send that off somewhere?
It depends. Okay. My preference is to send it off, because I like to get that objective point of view.
I mean, then you get one different take on what you've done.
Yeah, I can put it out there to somebody. They can listen to it in a different room on different speakers with a different set of ears, and they're going to hear it a totally different way, and they might hear something that got by everybody. So
that's good. Well, now your home studio is not where you're at these days, is it?
Not primarily. I moved back and forth between here and the Sound Factory up in Lincolnton, which is it's a 3-room studio up above Guitar Wishes, right there in downtown Lincolnton.
Now, do you get? I guess you get a different clientele than you get at your home studio.
No, it's I still deal with pretty much the same types of projects. Yeah. I definitely deal with more large bands up there. But even when I was primarily working here, I would work with bands, and we would go somewhere else and track drums, get the drums down, and then we would bring everything back here to my place, and we would do all the overdubs. Up there, I can knock all of that out in one room. That definitely helps. But
are drums the hardest thing?
They can be. Yeah, they're just because there's so many moving parts, and you're dealing with you're dealing with physics. When you got that many microphones in that close of a space, you got all kinds of potential problems where things can go wrong. And even the instrument itself, the way you mic it, your goal isn't to mic 8 different drum pieces and have 8 different sounds. It's your goal is to make 8 different drum pieces, but make it sound like one
set of drums.
And that can be tricky for some people.
That sure can.
It takes some practice.
Okay, this is a subject that I'm asked a lot, and I know that you're asked a lot. How about fixing mistakes and auto tuning and all? What part does that play these days?
Ideally,
first,
okay.
I come in and I stink as a singer. Can you make me sound like? Okay, I stink. So can you make me at least sound like Bruce Springsteen?
No.
Oh, golly gee.
Sorry to break your heart, but unfortunately, no.
Dang.
No. No, technology, the way I look at it, it's all tools. We've been given all of these tools that can help us do things. But the less of it I have to do, the better the project is. That's just how it's always been that way. If I'm having to fix a lot of things, there generally tends to be a ceiling on the project, and it's only ever going to be so good,
Oh, but you should be good at it, didn't you? You did a lot of hip hop, didn't you?
No.
Just a joke. It's a joke. I didn't.
But in hip hop, it's used as an effect.
It is. It is real. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, and it's definitely an overplayed effect at this point. But
true. But
yeah, it's it was used creatively to add something. Using it to fix and correct things, I'm not against it at all. For me, I'm a results guy. It's whatever gets us to the finish line.
If I come in and sing flat rather than do it 2 more times till I get it right, do we correct it, or
if I'm calling the shots, we're doing it to get it as close as we can to being good and right. That doesn't mean perfect, because for me as a producer, when I'm sitting back getting a vocal take from somebody and recording it, I'm looking for emotion.
Yeah, that's
I'm
great.
looking for feeling. And if you're making me feel the song, but you're a little flat on a note, I'm not going to throw away all of that emotion that we just captured, because that's the gold. That's what we're after.
That is, I agree.
And if it's a decision between, let me tweak this note and fix the tuning on it, or let's scrap this and do another take that might not be anywhere near as good, I'm always going to opt to keep the take and fix it.
That's why I'm coming to you. Is for that right there. I mean, that would be the reason I would come to you as opposed to someone. Yeah, we can fix it. Yeah, don't worry, I got it.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a difference.
Yeah, I think so. And for me, it's I don't have heroes in the music business really. I mean, I've been in it and around it long enough.
Me too. I'm the same way. Yeah.
It's like there are people. You look up to and respect, but I don't
they're
really
talented,
have heroes.
but they're just people.
Yeah. But if I had a hero in the business, it would be Dave Cobb.
Well, I was going there with that.
Nice.
Speaking of mistakes, you've seen in the Jason Isbell stuff where he'll sing the wrong word, but they won't fix it.
They won't fix it. They keep it. Because it adds to the record.
Yeah,
and that's the way records used to be made. It's like when I listen to, oh God, who is it? You Are So Beautiful. Joe Cocker.
Joe Cocker, yeah.
With that that vocal squeak at the end. As a singer, that's driving him nuts. That's like, we got to fix that. But the producer's like, no. That's it. Yeah. You just sold the song.
That's the we'll go
the
to Bob.
Intangible. Yeah.
We'll go to Bob Dylan with what's one time? Like a Rolling Stone.
Yep.
The organ part was not even supposed to be in there.
Right.
And Bob says, "Hey, turn that part up." And they said, no, that guy's not even, Al Cooper, actually. Yeah. He's not even a keyboard player.
Right.
But then it became the
part of it.
Yeah, the big part of the song.
Yeah, I mean, listening back to, bringing up Dylan, I was listening to, I can't remember which song it was the other day, but you can hear him start to go to the wrong chord or go to the chord too early.
Right.
And he kind of catches up, and it's one of his most famous songs. It might have been Rolling Stone. But you hear him catch up, but you're not going to throw away that take. It wasn't bad enough that you go, oh God. For me, the test is, does it break me out of the moment?
Right.
If it pulls me out of the song, it's like watching a movie. When you're watching the movie, you have to be in the movie.
True.
If you're noticing all these little details and the CGI is really bad and you're kind of separated, it loses it.
True.
That magic, the spell is broken. It's no different with songs. When you're listening to a song, can you get lost in the story?
Right.
That's, as a producer, that's what I'm looking for in the studio. When I'm listening back, I'm looking to get lost in it, and I'm looking for anything that's pulling me out of it.
Right.
And then I'm going to correct that. If it's pulling me out, we need to redo it. We need to fix it. Whatever.
That's great.
But if it adds, if it makes it more real, more human, leave it in, man.
Well, that's probably the records of the world.
Yeah.
That's the story of the great ones, really.
Yeah, and all of the great stuff. I mean, you go back to I'm a huge fan of the Motown stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And man, there was some not great.
I agree.
Stuff in those records if you listen. I mean, there's problems everywhere. You know, the background singers were out of key, or you know, the bass was a little flatter.
Tambourine was just a staunch out,
right?
Because it was on everything. But every once in a while, you think that's not the right beat. But then if you just listen to the song, it's like it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. And, you know, because of where it's from, we know and accept, and kind of subconsciously accept that those flaws are in there. And we just overlook them because we enjoy the music so much.
It's also probably pretty hard to do a flawless record, I would think.
It really is, yeah. And flawless records are boring.
They probably are,
They're stiff and they just have no personality.
Well, that's reading as opposed to playing, I guess.
Right.
Same thing. Same idea.
And I feel like when you listen to some records now, you know, that's what you get. Is
there's some cold records.
It looks and sounds like it should be good, but it's just not. You know, it's missing that realism, that humanity.
This is the best part of the story, right there. I mean, people don't realize this. Musicians sometimes don't realize this. Oh man, I messed up just a little bit there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It's like I'm glad to hear you say it from that side as opposed to.
Yeah.
You know, I have theories that I'm not too much of a perfectionist person either, but there again, I have quirky tastes. So
yeah, well, I think it's about fighting that mentality that just because we have a tool doesn't mean we have to always use it.
Right.
You know, it's like, what was the quote from Jurassic Park? The curly-headed guy. He says. You were so preoccupied with whether or not you could, you didn't stop to ask whether you should.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
And then for me, it's exactly the same in music. It's like, okay, we can do this, but what is it? Should we do this? Does it make the record better? You know? And
I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
I mean, in a real world, it would be perfect and still have heart and soul, but then that's not. That very rarely exists.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because I think humans are by their very natures imperfect. So perfection is imperfection to us. You know?
Yeah, that's probably true. That's a good way
it's
of looking
those quirks. It's that character that it adds. That's what we latch on to.
I mean, you have bad acts come to you?
I won't say bad acts. I think, there are inexperienced people, that I deal with a lot that need a little more help, a little more nurturing. It may take a little more effort to get something.
I mean, do you ever do it and think, there's no way in the world I can make this work at all?
No, it's not in my vocabulary.
That's great. I mean, that's a wonderful thing.
It's really not, and it probably comes from, starting with almost nothing, working with people who had very little to lose, had no experience in the studio. None of us had any experience.
Right.
And we were bound and determined to make something out of nothing.
That's great.
And I kind of carried that mentality that, no matter what walks through the door, because working in a commercial setting, I deal with all kinds of different
I'm sure, yeah.
Everything from, hip hop to bluegrass to rock to metal to, Christian music. I mean, all of it, the gamut. So I've got to be ready, whatever walks through that door, I've got to be able to switch gears.
To get the best out of that project that you can
project,
get out.
Because, what you're looking for in, a contemporary Christian project is completely different from what you're looking for in a bluegrass project.
Or even a contemporary Christian and a Southern gospel.
Very much,
I mean, they're both
yeah.
Christian acts, but there's that's two different worlds.
Two totally
musically,
different
two different
two different skill sets, two different ways of approaching it. Yeah. Absolutely, and so once you've spent enough time bouncing around from project to project in different genres with people at different talent levels, you kind of get over that it's bad mentality,
right.
And it's just, okay, this is what we have today.
Right.
What are we going to do with it? This is where we are. How far can we go? What's the best we can do with it? Yeah.
I mean, that's a really open-minded approach to things.
That's the only way to make it. I mean, in the studio, if you're closed off and opinionated, and this is how it has to be,
Yeah.
and you're judgmental on everything.
What? It's not your way or the highway?
Yeah, it's.
I mean, I come to you and it's not.
Right.
This is what you're going to do.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, you have to have that flexibility because everybody's different. Everybody's music is unique.
Yeah, songwriters get their feelings hurt if you even change a the or the.
Right, right, yeah, tomato to tomato.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you have to be able to judge people's personalities and get a feel for them, and then try to figure out the best way to communicate with them.
You're making this sound like a really hard job. Everybody thinks, I can sit back there and push a button here and there.
It's not an easy job.
Yeah.
It's something that takes a lot of practice, a lot of failure.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's how you do get better.
Yeah.
I mean it is.
Yeah. There's a lot of failure, a lot of I should have handled this differently. Next time you'll know.
Is it hard to keep up with the technology?
I mean, once you're in it, not so much.
Yeah.
Because once you're in it, and you've been in it a while and you understand the technology as a whole, there are things that'll pop up that are new and interesting. Oh, this is really cool.
Right.
What we can do now. But they all generally kind of fall into certain categories.
Okay.
There's not a whole lot that's like totally groundbreaking
right.
and changes
Okay.
everything.
Well, the next thing, how do you decide what mic you're going to use on a vocal? What determines that for you?
The singer.
The singer.
Yeah, for me, it's always about that. That's the number one consideration. Number two would be context. What's the musical context?
Right. Well, what's that going to sit up on?
Right.
Yeah.
If it's something that's a little warmer sounding and more traditional, I might go with a ribbon mic or a dynamic mic or a vintage sounding condenser. If it's something that's like super modern, like EDM or something like that, I'm going to go with something bright and edgy and aggressive.
Yeah.
But I'm also going to pair it with the vocalist.
They bring you something for you to hear before you do it. I mean, they don't just come in. Your acts come
That's
in.
my preference for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you don't like. Okay, I'm coming in here today. And I want you to record 4 songs of mine. And here we go.
You'd be surprised how many people come in that way.
Really?
Yeah. I ask people all the time for, there's 2 things I ask for. Demos of the songs if we're working on it, if they've got, even if it's just them on an acoustic guitar in their living room.
At least you have an idea of what's going on.
Right. It's that way I'm not coming in totally blind. So, and that's I think that's kind of the disconnect is to the artist. They've lived these songs.
True.
They know the songs. They don't realize I have no idea what's about to come out of their mouth.
Right.
So I try to get them to send me something.
Right.
The other thing that I like to ask for up front is I want to know what record you like.
Oh, okay.
I want to know what kind of music you're into. I want to know if there are any particular records that you're into, artists that you're into, because that gives us common ground. That gives us a way to understand each other. There's so much music out there, and personal taste is so varied.
It is.
That I can be dealing in the morning with somebody that sees music that hates Bob Dylan.
Right. Right.
And then dealing in the evening with somebody that wants to sound exactly like Bob Dylan. And it's totally different mentalities. So by having that conversation, there's an old saying that talking about music is like dancing about architecture.
Okay.
It's like talking about music is kind of pointless. I need to hear what you're into.
Well, and that's as far as that goes, we're back to why music should never be a competition, or it's what it is. And in your case, you're wanting to take it to where the person who is making this music wants it to go.
Right. And sometimes they don't even know where they want it to go.
Well, now that's where your job as a producer totally comes in.
Right, and that's where those initial conversations about what kind of music do you like help me to know if I end up in this ballpark, we're going to be okay.
Right.
You're going to be happy.
Right.
If we end up in a completely different ballpark, then I didn't do my job to understand your needs going into it.
Yes. You're convincing me to record with you, and I haven't even got anything to record these days. I'm kind of wishing I hadn't spent all my time over the years from other places. I didn't know I had a choice. I didn't know I could ask for a sound. No, that's great, though. I mean, I'm joking and making light of that. Part of it is not really a joke, but that's why you do need to think about where you're going to record and who you're going to record with. Actually go see the people. What would you give advice to a band looking for somebody, to record them?
Shop around, talk to different people. Don't let money be the determining factor. There's always somebody out there that'll do it for cheaper.
True.
It's not about cheap. It's about getting the result that you want. If all you're looking for is a demo, and you're not really worried about the quality, okay, then maybe price is your best bet. If you're looking to make an artistic statement, if you're looking to put something on tape that represents you and your music in the way that you want it to be represented, you need to find somebody that gets that vision. And that can help you to get to that point.
Because I think bands just wind up a lot of times, young bands going to the first person or the cheapest person, whichever comes first.
Right.
I mean, a lot of times they'll pay too much because it's the only person it's their only option.
Yeah.
That they know of anyway.
Yeah, and you'll never hear me say anything bad about, big A-list studios. They charge a ton of money, but they're worth it. If you go into it and know what you're doing.
True.
If you don't, they can suck your wallet dry in the blink of an eye.
I mean, there's mills in Nashville that will do your demos for
a couple $100.
Yeah, a couple $100, and that's what you got. So,
sounds like everything else.
It does. I mean, if that's what you're and like you said, if a demo is what you're looking, that'll serve its purpose.
Sure.
But it's that's another thing too I've learned over the years. No matter how bad your music is, there's somebody somewhere that thinks that's the greatest thing in the world. We touched a little bit on this before we started rolling, but I mean that's the market that we're in. Is I think independent artists, as soon as they try to compete in the music industry on major label terms, they lose. They do.
Because they don't have the money, they don't have the backing, they don't have the exposure. It takes a ton of all of those things to get your music out there to enough people.
Sure, it does.
To have a hit, a
and
top.
the spin doctors are gone. There's no radio stations to I'll pay this guy to take my record and beg him to play it.
Right. So we've entered into an era where independent artists can be very successful, but it comes down to identifying your niche, finding your audience. Your audience might be in Denmark, you know. I mean, it's if you're in Shelby, North Carolina, and you play polka, you're probably not
going to have a big following.
Not around here. No. But if you can find a pocket of people up in Pennsylvania,
Cincinnati, Ohio, a lot of German. Sure.
I mean, and you can communicate with those people online. You can market yourself to them. Make a trip up there a couple times a year. Play shows. That's your following. We live in an era where that's possible.
But you understand too that musicians usually are musicians, and once that happens, I recorded this great project. What do I do with it? And I'm including myself, but most musicians. What they have in talent to play or write sometimes escapes them with the rest of
the business side.
Yeah, the business side.
Yeah, and in economics, there's what we call the theory of the firm, and the theory of the firm talks about just the advantages of being able to keep everything in house. It's more efficient and whatever. And if you're in a band, that makes sense because you've usually got 4 or 5 people in there, and they're all going to have different strengths and weaknesses. True. So if you're in a band, find ways to leverage that. Figure out who's good at what, and let them deal with it. I think a lot of times what I see in bands is you got one guy that does everything.
Yeah, you do.
And that's almost by choice. That they
well, that's true. It's easier,
right?
Yeah, I mean, it just keeps the peace. And one
exactly.
you got to have a boss.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think to be successful in today's industry, you're going to have to let each of those other people
do what
they do best.
Yeah.
And then wherever you come up short, that's where you go to outside help. That's where you look for other people to come in and help you as contractors or whatever.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of bands miss that.
Yeah.
It depends on what you want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, in the degree of success, but just as a band itself and the members, a lot of times they need some outside help.
Definitely, and I think the bottom line is, people are only going to take your music as seriously as you do.
Well, this is true.
And if you're not willing to, if you don't believe enough in your music to invest in a good record,
right,
to invest in promotion and booking and all of this other stuff, mm-hmm. It's not going to go anywhere. It's it's going to sit there and do nothing.
And a large portion of that is a bit easier these days with all the networking you can do.
Sure.
I mean, there's a lot of things you can do to promote yourself.
And there's so much education out there too. There's books and YouTube videos, and there's online classes that you can take that will educate you on all these things. But you have to be willing to put in the time and the effort.
You do. And a lot of times that escapes people for whatever reason. But then that's the success. Then that you earn the success that you deserve.
You get what you put in.
Yeah, you do. You do. Well, this has been great. You need to have actually a seminar for bands. I mean, you could. From that part alone,
Sure. I do speak usually every year up at the Don Gibson Songwriter Symposium. It's usually songwriters up there. But
True.
I usually do. The last 3 years I've done like an hour-long workshop, and then off and on I teach at Gardner Webb, music production over there.
Right.
And go through all this stuff. But yeah, I'd love to. For me, it's the more people that know about this, the more people that have their stuff together and understand the process, and the easier it is for me as a producer to work.
True, I'm sure that is.
And ultimately, the better we're going to work together, and the better the end results are going to be.
All right, we're back with Aaron Meier, and he's going to tell you how to get in touch if you need his services or would like his services, and I would recommend them.
All over Facebook and Instagram. You can find me, Aaron Jason Meier, on Facebook, Sound Factory Studios on Facebook and Instagram. Just reach out there, and happy to talk with you and see how we can help.
Well, we're going to one other thing now. I've always heard that you're totally booked.
Stay pretty booked, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're thinking of a project, then you need to plan ahead, right?
And that's just generally good advice.
True.
It's, the idea that you're going to go into a studio. The worst situations that I get put in are when people make all these plans themselves but don't involve me until the last minute.
Right.
Then they expect to come into the studio the following week and we knock out their album, and then they're done in a month. No, we need to be planning this a month ahead.
And I guess you need to know how to block studio time so you can do a project, and possibly you got other projects you can or cannot work around.
Sure, and that's the reality of kind of the business today and budgets is, 30 years ago a band could go in and lock out a studio for 6 months.
True.
They'd live there forever.
True.
The studio was making money. They didn't have to worry about balancing other acts, other projects. That room was this band's for X amount of weeks or months or whatever. Now, bands are booking by the hour, and it's a half day here, a full day there.
Sure.
It might.
Can you piece together something that way?
Sure.
You can get a good project that way.
It can absolutely. It'll take a while.
Right, but say you're limited. You're on a limited budget. You're living from 4 jobs to. I can pay for studio time to.
Yeah, I can tell you the average on a full album, as far as time, when you're dealing with a band and everybody's schedules and budgetary constraints, it's nothing to spend a year on it.
Yeah, well, I realize that, but
and
that's counting
Right. And that's doing, anywhere from 1 to 3 sessions a week.
Right.
Over months and months and months.
Yeah.
So, it can definitely be done. It's most of the projects that I've worked on here have been done that way because not many people have all that money.
That's true. They don't just
slap down up front.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. This has been very interesting, very eye-opening for, I'm sure, a lot of people. You're the only real record producer that I've had on here. And I think people miss that part. There's audio engineers. There's a lot of things, but it's really a big hat you wear.
A lot of different hats.
That's
the big thing. Yeah, and that's something you hear commonly said about producers because you have to be able to move from psychologist to audio engineer to best friend to
babysitter.
Yeah, there's so many things that you have to jump between, but it's an art. For sure.
That's good. Well, I do appreciate you taking the time to do this.
I appreciate you having me.
All right, thank you.